But that sort of comes to this where we've just begun, actually, that very, very different wiring. I mean, I literally can't look at instruction manuals. I look at them and
Your brain just shut down.
it just absolutely shuts. I can read, the most complex, difficult piece of literary fiction that's 900 pages long. I cannot read an instruction manual. My brain refuses. And nor can I look at a spreadsheet. I cannot.
No,
I've tried. I cannot.
I'm with you on spreadsheets. The thing with the
Okay,
instruction
cool.
manuals, though, like something that drives me mad. I used to be more into kind of filmmaking and making short films with friends, 15 years ago. And if I bought like a fancy DSLR video camera, I would read that manual top to bottom because that thing cost me like £800 or something, and I was going to get every single feature, every bit of value out of it. Whereas I'd have a friend or another filmmaker who would get it and then just kind of bodge their way through it and not do all the cool stuff you could do, and that makes my brain twitch.
Did it make your brain hurt when you hit?
It does a little bit,
someone? Yeah. Right.
It's why I'm always doing tinkering around on Substack and going, oh, here's a new feature. I'll poke at it.
Right, because there is no instruction manual. So does it? Do you wish there was in some way? Would that be easier for you rather than the way it is, which is you just learn as you play, don't you? I think that's one of the things that makes it work so well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fairly discoverable, isn't it? Like, you get some things, if you've bought a complicated camera, then there's a good chance that, like, unless you're really experienced at using cameras, obviously, but you're not going to know you can look at it and fiddle with it as much as you want, and you're not going to understand half of it. Whereas I think with Substack, you can poke around and you'll probably figure out like most of it without too much pain.
There are some areas that I simply don't go into, like the chat. I never go near it. And I was talking to someone the other day, it might even have been Sherman, and just saying, when you're new to Substack, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be active on in every single room that's on offered. You don't have to use every single last drop of technology, from podcast to video to chat to notes you just kind of find the streams that really feed you, and that's how I do it. And don't worry about all the other ones. I've kind of found that there's like 2 or 3 places where I'm super comfortable, like this, and posting obviously on my publication, but even notes, I don't, I hear people recommend, in terms of what it does to sort of increase your discoverability. Tom Cox did it brilliantly on notes. He's always posting something hilarious there that's really funny and it really works.
He's always got a new sheet or some sort of weird portal like
just now. Yeah, just now was Path of the Week, which I really liked as well.
Very good. Yeah,
he's just funny. But yeah, okay. But what I want to know is your friend who bought the same camera and didn't look at the instruction manual. Did they eventually find all the bits that you found, or were they left in the dark in some bits?
Probably slightly in the dark, and then I would show them stuff. Like as long as you've got like a version of me around, like you'll always be told how to do things, I suppose. But I enjoy it. I think, I've always been quite a techie person, so I like exploring features and seeing how things work, and then going, oh, what happens if I plug this into this and all that kind of stuff.
And you're not afraid of it?
No, I'm not very practical around the house. Like when it comes to DIY, I'm absolutely useless. Like I'm terrible at that.
You can't change a light bulb.
Well, I can do that, but having said that, we do have a smart bulb that we got, and I have no idea how to connect that. But anyway, but yeah, when it comes to sort of computer type tech, then I'm very comfortable, and not worried about breaking. Generally,
I imagine it was brains like yours that built what we now view as the standard model for computer software and hardware, right? It is your kind of brain. Must be.
Maybe.
Otherwise you wouldn't be so comfortable and be able to find your way around it so easily. No?
I guess. I don't know if I want to accept that, given how tech has like semi-destroyed the whole world. I don't know if I want to be lumped in with them.
Yeah, well, but they're not the builders of the original framework. They apply it. And yes, they are. I don't know if you've watched Carol Cadwallader's TED Talk. It's called.
I've read a lot of her stuff.
The Digital Coup. Yeah, well, I recommend anybody listening. I've put it on. I was going to say tweeted it. I've put it on notes a few times, and But yeah, I mean, it's that it's absolutely fundamentally a threat to our democracy. And actually, I've been thinking recently into, I don't know how much you know about ESG and markets, but there's a basic framework called ESG, which used to be like the ethical framework for investment, and it's now called I can't think what ESG stands for, but someone will put it in the thing right now, I'm sure. And normally it's the usual sin bucket is alcohol, firearms, tobacco, gambling, that kind of thing, right? But actually, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, like, should tech be in there now because it is a clear and vital threat to democracy, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
now
and
a current.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we couldn't go as off topic as this if we tried. But yeah, like, the thing that
we
irritates
could.
me is like you get all the debate is around children and their access to phones and social media, which is a really important debate. But
Yeah,
the bit that always is left out of that debate, I'm like, what about the adult? They're really bad at
yeah.
it as well.
Yeah, yeah. They're really bad at it. They are, and they're well, it's and I'm an addict. I know exactly. I recognize that behavior in myself, and I absolutely don't scroll. I think that's probably why I don't get into notes actually as well, because it will twang my addict's brain. I think Tommy Swerdlow, who's also in recovery, or I think we're always in recovery. He put out a really great piece the other day about he's got a pain in his leg and he went to his doctor and the doctor was like, well, I can give you these like muscle relaxants. And he was like, because he knew already his addict's brain just kicked in absolutely immediately because you start planning. And I think that's what keeps me away from notes. I stay off I mean, I'm on Instagram for work, but I don't scroll. I don't like spend hours going through and
Yeah, I
what
try and
other
have a rule with notes that I let myself scroll twice, and if I don't see anything, then I go do something else.
stop. Yeah.
Yeah, and I usually do see something of interest. So the reason that works, that doesn't work on Instagram and places like that because you scroll
Right.
twice and it's like, no, no, keep going, keep going. Whereas on notes, usually within a couple of scrolls, I'll see something interesting from a writer.
Yeah, I will usually dive into something someone's recommended
Yeah.
and find somebody. And I think that does work. So how's your year been on Substack?
Yeah, good, I think. It was a weird start because I had this really odd period in October, November where I had like massive numbers of new subscribers and paid subscribers coming in. I was really confused. I was like, this is nice, but I don't understand what's going on here.
Mm.
Um, and then and then that all flatlined a bit in December, and then in January it just started going down again. And I was like, oh, what have I done here? What's happened? Because
Just
ordinarily,
ask you a second. What do paid subscribers get that free subscribers don't get on your site?
uh, so I put everything out for free.
Yeah.
Paid subscribers get a nice ebook version of Tales from the Triverse, so they can just stick it on their phone or e-reader or whatever. And
Okay.
like, there's some way back archival stuff that is paywalled now. Like anything from 2 years back is kind of slightly paywalled, so you don't have to pay at all. So again, that was why I was like, why are these people paying? Like, it's
Great.
always lovely,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
most of my paying subscribers obviously don't do it for perks. They do it because they presumably like what I do. And I was like, it can't be this. This is very odd in such a compressed period. And then obviously
Yeah.
they basically were there for a month and then disappeared. And I was like, oh, is
Okay.
the dream over?
The same numbers. Did it literally do that?
Well,
Was it the same
yeah,
numbers in and out?
yeah.
Wow.
Once I'd got longer term, you can, if you look at
Mm.
the graph, it kind of goes up in a fairly steady way. But there's this weird
Yeah.
blip where it suddenly
Right.
accelerated and then dropped back down to where it should be, if you see what I mean. And I'm
Right.
pretty sure, don't
Yeah.
know for certain, but I'm pretty sure it was the US election. Even though I don't write anything about politics or do any journalistic stuff. But I do have some like, what is Substack videos? And here's how you use Substack. And I think it was that kind of big
Oh.
exodus that happened when lots more people left Twitter or were looking for stuff. And a lot of US journalism was happening on Substack about the US election. And
Yeah.
that led people via a kind of weird circuitous route to me. Um, and then I sent them a chapter of Tales from the Triverse, and they were like, "What is this? What is this strange fiction?"
They weren't speculative fiction fans. They were there for the how-to
But yeah,
guides.
they were sort of drive-by how-to political refugees or something. It's very peculiar. So that was a weird start.
Wow.
And
And
yeah,
that
it's kind of
was right. So that was January. No, that was
That was sort of from the election through to January. It was all just a bit confusing and weird. And since then, it's kind of gone back to a normal place. And yeah, no, it's been quite a nice year. Like doing a mixture of like these live things and getting some more time for articles. And Triverse is ticking along towards its finale. And yeah, that's all quite exciting. So yeah, no, otherwise it was good. But yeah, it was a confusing start to the year.
I'm going to return to Triverse in a minute, but I just wanted to say as well, any of the classes I've been teaching on serialization, I've included you as a link at the end because, well, A, because you're great, and B, because we are so different in the way we go about it. And I always want to keep the gate open because we are equal and opposite. And what might work for some people my way will work for other people your way. So I always include your link. So I was just trying to see whether any of my classes lined up with that spike. That was all. But I don't think they did. And I don't think they would have sent that many people there because it would have been, they weren't as big as that. Although you never know.
If you had that kind of power to send people to people's newsletters, that would be quite
so powerful.
I think it might have been Trump, unfortunately.
I think it was Trump.
You're not quite on his level of influence.
I'm not quite on his level of influence, although I am trying in terms of sending traffic your way. But in no other way do I want to be affiliated. So my year, from January, how's it been? I think because I've been serializing, for the last 2 years, and I finished Fallout on New Year's Eve. And you know what it's like. Well, maybe I don't know. Hang on. Well, because Triverse isn't finished yet, but you've finished others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you get to the end, there's a kind of incredible gallop and build and amazing and a sense of huge satisfaction. And you're there and hopefully, you've brought a really nice, loyal readership with you. And then it all ends. Wow. And everything. And then there's this massive sort of dopamine crash. Now how am I going to get my kicks? Because those 2 novels, In Judgment of Others and Fallout, they were absolutely ready to go. And I serialized them because they were sitting in a drawer ready to go. And and my memoir. And so that was a really good experience. But I didn't have anything else. And I knew that I was gearing up to begin a new novel, which I'm writing, which I'm about halfway through, which is, I'm absolutely writing it the old-fashioned way. I'm at my desk every day. It's at first draft stage. Absolutely nobody will read it, not my agent, no one, until I've had a good 4 drafts at it, probably. So I'm a long way from publishing any fiction on Substack, even though my whole kind of shtick with my publication, The Literary Obsessive, is all about championing literary fiction. And I don't know if you've seen that little thing. We're now getting the hashtag, 17 in fiction or whatever it is. That little.
Oh, yes.
What
rising in
we'll
fiction.
Get to that.
Yeah, that's on my notes to talk about as well.
Okay, good. Right, we'll get them in. So I've been a bit like, so now what? Because actually, there's hundreds of thousands of fiction writers on Substack who is not publishing fiction. And I felt very proud of being one of the few who not only was a fiction writer, but who was actually publishing literary fiction on Substack, because that was quite a niche little corner. And then it stopped. So I was a bit like, what am I going to do now? So I've had to kind of square that circle inside myself in terms of my pride, my ego, my dopamine hits, my need to connect, all of that stuff. I've been like, well, the fact is I'm a literary fiction writer and I'm off writing a novel and it's going to take me 18 months. So even if I had another one in the drawer to go out now, I'd have to stop writing the novel I'm writing in order to prep it and get it ready. So I just can't do that. So that's why I think one of the reasons why I'm sort of been leaning into doing these live conversations, because they're really fun. They're super easy. They're great. I get to elevate or publicize other writers, which I really love doing. And I get my visibility up there as well because I'm active on the site. And I think that's good for me too. So, it's like a win-win. But I've also started writing the Obsessive Diary as well. And I think that's my little dopamine hit. It's like, again, it's the practice of writing every day. So it's not fiction, it's diary. But I'm writing every day and I'm posting every day exactly like I did when I first joined Substack. And that's just going to have to do me, really, I think, until do you know when? I think for the next whenever. I'm just trying to, on 8Q, I always have that question, how long does it take you to settle into find your groove? And at the moment, I'm just trying to find that groove now where that's what I do. And that has to be fine. What's my new groove? Yeah, because that has to be fine, because fundamentally, the most important thing I'm doing is writing a new novel. Because without that, I'm really not, that's the beating heart of me. Like, without that, I'm not really a writer. I'm just a pretend. I mean, in my scale, I apply this to me. I don't apply this to anyone else. So that's where I am, really.
Yeah, so it's a challenge, isn't it, trying to find all the time? But I think my theory is that, particularly if you've got people, people came to you reading Fallout or In Judgment of Others, and the same with my stuff. Like, I think if someone's choosing to read serial online week by week in this like really inconvenient manner, when they could go and buy or borrow an infinite number of amazing books in a traditional novel format, like if they're doing that, I think they're sort of interested in the process by default almost, because it's such an awkward way in that I think even if you're not publishing the fiction, most of those people who came along for the ride on the serials will probably still be quite interested in what you're up to anyway, even if they've got to wait a little bit for the next bit of the fiction.
The next bit, I hope that's to be true, and I suspect it is true, and it relates again to the pay or not to pay aspect, which is, I understand now, because I put the Obsessive Diary behind a paywall, so there's a little bit that's for free and then the rest of it's behind a paywall, and I've never done that, but I decided to do that partly because I did want to start raising some revenue, and partly because I don't need anybody to read it, because it's sort of a private diary. I mean, obviously I don't put super private stuff in there, but this is my day to day, what I'm doing, what's happened. There's stuff in there that's very personal to me. So I just thought, well, I'll put it behind a paywall. And if people pay for it, they're more likely to be sympathetic with what they're reading. It's not just going out to everybody. Yeah. So, and that has, but there's been a huge uplift in the people who said yes. But I think, they're investing in me. So not the people. There are people on there who who are my friends and who I love, who have very kindly done that. But there's also lots of people I don't know who I think, hopefully, they're investing in me and my life as a writer. And I do talk a lot about the process of what I'm writing. So they're seeing the fucking hair tearing. Christ, I'm making a fuss. I'm making such a fuss. I always feel like going, so sorry. And I just think, well, no, because it's a private diary. And actually, I'm not sorry, because it is really hard to write a novel. And I'm in that.
Yeah.
I'm just going into the end. I'm going down into the end of the second act. And it's hard.
Yeah. And I think historically, people who want to know how films are made, or even comics, various other art forms, music, there's always tons of interviews and behind the scenes information available, computer games, whatever it may be. But books are this kind of weird, slight dark zone where it's not really talked about in the same way. If you're a filmmaker, or if you're a kid who wants to be a filmmaker, even if you can't afford to go to film school or study it at university, there's just an infinite amount of really high quality stuff just on YouTube where you can go and find out how to make a movie. And maybe it's because it's a more visual medium, I don't know. But like, if you want to be a novelist, you don't really get the behind the scenes stuff. You get loads of sort of theory courses, but it's much more unusual, until maybe more recently, I guess, to just go behind the scenes with the creators of the novel, or the author. So I think that stuff's really interesting. That's why I share a lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, it's partly because it's glacial and it's quite repetitive. I think behind the scenes in writing a novel, it's literally just every day tearing your hair out and then moving one step forward and then two steps back. And so I think it's partly that, and also because you do get a lot of you get a kind of, in hindsight, God, yeah, it's really hard. But yeah, I think actually, let's find out. But I think the day-to-day repetitiveness of it, seeing somebody in real time write a novel and report on it, I think is proving to be of some sort of interest so far. And I'm happy for that. And there's another bit of me, and I remember this actually when I got sober, was like, because how delicate these things are. You don't want to burst the bubble. You don't want to ruin it. Like there's plenty. I don't give anything away about what I'm writing. I really don't let it out the gate at all because it's literally information. But there's also still even that. I even have a nervousness like, God, if I talk about even the process of it in real time too much, will that leak energy away from it?
Yeah, you like talk it out of existence.
Talk it out of existence. But actually, I've decided instead to turn it around and say, okay, I'm just going to lean on this bit because literally no one has to read the Obsessive Diary. So I can be as whiny and repetitive and boring as I want to be because it is literally just for me. So I'm sort of making it the place where I go and gnash my teeth and feel pissed off and then feel really embarrassed because I get to be a writer. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not, it's an amazing life. Like I really should be complaining.
Yeah. But no, I think it's important also for any newer writers or people who want to become writers. It's important to know like the trickiness of it.
Yeah.
Because you have to be aware of that stuff because you're going to encounter it anyway. Yeah. And if you know about it ahead of time, and then you also don't have that thing where you're like, is it just me? Is it, do I just find this really hard because I'm terrible at it? And it's like, no, actually everyone feels exactly
no. Or trash a perfectly good novel because that daily voice at some point says, no, this is shit. And if you know that, no, this is part of the process, you just don't take a breath, well, you breathe, but you write from the beginning of the first draft to the end of the first draft, and then you take a view, but you do not trash it halfway through. Yeah, because otherwise great books will be lost. So are you writing about your process in real time on your Substack, or how are you exploring it?
So what I tend to do, so each chapter of Triverse, which goes out on a Friday, has a little author notes bit at the bottom. So it's almost like a little sort of author commentary on that chapter. It can be about anything. It can be about the story or the structure of it, or maybe something that happened to a character and why I did that. And a bit like you were saying, I avoid spoilers so that people who are reading it can read those author notes without spoiling what's coming up. But just kind of explaining some of the structure. If I do a chapter that is more of an action scene, for example, I might then do author notes on like my approach to writing action, that kind of thing. So it's kind of whatever comes up, I suppose. So it can vary quite wildly. Sometimes I'll just go off on a tangent, or it'll be about a theme that I'm touching upon. And but I quite like it. I've always sort of diarized the writing, even back when I was writing on Wattpad. I did it on my own blog, and like literally nobody read that at all. But I quite enjoy it because I think it's a sort of that analytical process of talking about the thing I just wrote helps me better understand it, and then that quite often then leads to new ideas for upcoming stuff as well.
And I wonder if as well, there's a kind of download aspect to it where, for me, I'm in the headspace where I'm pulling something out of nothing. So I'm in the absolutely pure creative space. And then I need to go from that space into this space where, for instance, I'd be able to have a conversation with you. And that in between bit, because that's when I write it, it kind of, it brings me back into this. I think it helps me change space, maybe because it's like a line, isn't it, between the two? Maybe that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, like I mean, obviously it's whatever works for each individual writer, but like for me, I don't write every day, and I kind of make a point of not. I mean, I quite often end up writing every day, but I don't write Triverse every day. Partly because even if I could carve out the time to do it, which is challenging, I actually find that leaving gaps in between writing sessions is massively valuable. That's quite often that's when things percolate, and if I have a day or two when I don't directly write, when I come back to it, suddenly the thing I was intending to write is loads better than it was otherwise. And I think if I tried to go down the more traditional, you have to write every day kind of mantra, I think the results would actually be far worse. Because it's why I don't do NaNoWriMo or anything like that these days, because I just trip over myself, basically. I've now, I publish on a Friday and then I give myself a few days and then I'm back to the next chapter. But the gaps are really important. Otherwise that kind of relentlessness could get to you, I think. But then I guess we're straying into that discussion we were going to have about the different approaches to serialization.
Yeah, and I have to guard against beasting myself. And actually, I am with this, because that's what that tends to be my default. I beast myself with writing. I'm like, because I do write every day, and sometimes I try not to, but I just genuinely, it's. But actually, on the novel, the first draft I'm writing, because it's the first time I've been writing a novel when I've had a lot of other industry work to do simultaneously. I've never had that. For all the other novels I've written, all I've been doing is being a mum and writing novels and like running the estate that I run, but but no other writing work. But now I'm delivering workshops. I'm at literary festivals. I'm writing on Substack. I'm doing a load of things. So there are some days when I genuinely can't get to that novel. And in the past, I really would have beasted myself, but actually these days I'm like, no, it's okay. And I'm taking much more of a breath. And I hope it's aligning with the feedback that I'm always getting from my editor, and great friend, Andrew Willey, and also from my agent, which is just slow down, slow down, relax, be patient, so I'm hoping this novel will bear the fruits of that, of being a little bit more relaxed around it. But tell me, with Triverse, so you deliver on a Friday, you take a few days off, then do you read the last chapter, just one chapter previous, before you write the next? And are you ahead of yourself, or are you literally on the money, on the button right now?
Yeah, I don't have any buffer at all.
No buffer. Okay.
No, I always start off with a buffer. Whenever I start a new like major project, I have this like 10-week buffer or something, and it just disappears. And it's like, oh, that was a nice idea. But yeah, no, so I'll look at where what the last chapter was. Quite often, I will have notes and plans several chapters ahead, so it's not like I go in blind. I always know where it's headed.
Okay.
And the previous chapter will, because the structure of Triverse is it's lots of little mini anthology type stories that sort of link together. So you might get like a 4-chapter storyline, and that story over those 4 chapters will be a continuing thing. So I'll have a pretty good idea of what's happening for that, and then after that we'll switch to a new story, which will take a bit more work. But yeah, I always kind of know where it's going, and then it's just a matter of getting the words down. I think this is what I was talking about with Scrivener recently. Like I use Scrivener extensively for doing this kind of stuff. I need to be able to hop between chapters really quickly, look at my notes, have it all kind of like organized perfectly in front of me, because I don't have much time, and I need to be able to reference everything to hopefully not fall into any plot holes or back myself into a corner or anything like that. But yeah, that's just kind of how I've ended up writing. And I think that was born out of not writing, really. This just turned out to be the way that got me coming back to the page on a regular basis.
Just side note, Scrivener is another perfect example of I don't know what you call it, but whatever that system is, that I could not. My brain was like, no. I mean, I don't even like Word, but I've managed to. But I just could not. I did not like it. I tried it a little bit, thinking, because everyone was like, oh, this will make life much easier. And it made my life so complicated. But there you go again, it's just like wiring, isn't it? So have you fallen into plot holes then? Have you found? Tell me what chapter are we on with Triverse?
I don't know. I stopped numbering them. I used to number the chapters for like the first, when I started it, each chapter was like, chapter 1, here's the name of the chapter. I did that for about 50 or 60 chapters. And then I realized that for the first 10 or so, 10, 20 chapters, that's fine. After which it just increasingly makes the book look ludicrously long, which it kind of is. But if you come along to a serial and it's like, it's chapter 6 million, you're like, I'm not going to read that.
I don't think so. But could someone join? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you just stopped dead. Did you just stop dead?
Yeah, and just went back and had to edit like 60 blimmin' posts to remove the numbers, which was a pain in the ass.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't do that. And the way I present it is as this kind of anthology thing. So in theory, you can hop on whenever you want and just be like, I'm going to read this story because it sounds interesting. And there is like an ongoing thread, but yeah.
So you can hop in anywhere, and it should at least be fun and make sense for that particular section.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, certainly up up until this year, because it's kind of entered into the kind of finale phase now, where everything's coming together. So I think if you hopped on now, it would probably be immensely confusing. But up until this year, it was, because it's, it's presented as detective crime fiction basically. So each individual storyline is a case that is being investigated. So you could, in theory, just hop onto one of those and you get that particular investigation start to finish, and that's that. Or you can read it more like a novel. But yeah, that was all me trying to figure out, how do I make this very long serial approachable and palatable, and that doesn't feel to new readers like it's just tons of homework. So it's kind of trying to break it down into something that at a glance you go, oh, this looks fun, rather than, oh my God, that's a lot of reading.
Yeah, and so right from the get-go, you did know that. That was the question you asked. You knew you had something, or you knew you wanted to write long. You knew you wanted to write multiple storylines, and the question was how to do it. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
in terms of your thinking as you began. I mean, like, you're very...
Yes, and I knew structurally it was going to be quite different to what I'd done before. So my previous serials were much more like novels broken down into serialized parts. Whereas this one, from the beginning, I was like, actually, I'm going to do this in a sort of semi-anthological manner, where it is actually self-contained stories, but with the same characters carrying through, like you're watching a TV show with a bunch of...
Well, I was going to say, it really, really sounds like it would lend itself incredibly well to a long-running whatever, Netflix something, or I keep thinking Black Mirror, but although they're not connected, but yeah, it's the self-contained but part of a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the thinking with this one, which I hadn't tried before. I was like, let's embrace the sort of TV aesthetic in terms of structure, and see how that works in prose.
And that was just experiment, because you like experimenting. You just thought, let's just try this. This looks interesting. Let's see if I can do it.
Yeah, and I thought it might help with getting more readers to come on board. I don't really know yet whether that's actually happened or not. And because it was crime fiction, I was like, this would be fun to have, rather than having a novel approach where it might be like a single investigation that is the novel, that actually being able to hop between different things and explore lots of different themes in various ways through the lens of these detectives doing their thing. And that seemed like it would be fun.
And how do you know it's coming to an end? I mean, that might seem like a stupid question, but you know what I mean. How do you know?
So it's two things really. So what was interesting, which I hadn't quite anticipated, is that in theory it could have gone on forever, because as long as I had ideas for the individual little stories, the investigations, I could just keep doing that. Like, I've still got like 20 ideas in a folder that I could just pull out. So for most of Try versus Run, I did have a folder of ideas, and as and when I'd be like, I'm going to do this one next, and I'd like slot it in on Scrivener. There'd be this background plot running through it as well, and character arcs and what have you. But essentially, it was one story at a time. But the two things were, one, I wanted to finish it so I could do something else, which was like a big factor. And also, I think stories that have endings are better, basically. Which I know sounds kind of obvious, but like,
but
there's nothing...
Well, no, but it's worth saying as well. Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than a TV show that fizzles out and just becomes a bit crap over time, or even worse than that, gets cancelled and it just stops.
Or you can always tell when the quality, the writer's room, so the cumulative talent in the writer's room has been depleted as the show is losing numbers, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and by the end it's just formulaic, and the great geniuses behind whatever show that was simply aren't in the writer's room, and you can really tell. So yes, you need to keep that level up.
Yes. And like although structurally it was kind of crime fiction, like my go-to for serial storytelling, I suppose, is a 90s science fiction show called Babylon 5. And Try versus overall structure is quite similar to that, in that if you watch that show, you can see that season 1 is just standalone stories. Like, it's like on a space station, each episode's like some sort of adventure in space. And season 2, you start to get all these other little plot twists coming in the background. And then season 3, that all comes to the fore, and the kind of individual episodic stuff drops away. And then the last 2 seasons is just like finale. It's fully arc driven, more like a novel. If you tune in at that point, you have no idea what's going on because you have to watch what came before. But it's that kind of slow shift from individual parts to a more kind of joined up whole, I suppose.
And
So that's kind of
presumably with that, and then also with yours, that structural decision season to season must have been based on audience number feedback, mustn't it? Like, this is what they're loving is the relationship between character A and character B, and so that's what we're seeing, isn't it? It's a result of a response to that. So have you responded as you've gone along to audience
there's been a bit of that,
feedback
like,
or comments or something?
you have to be a bit careful, because obviously that can derail you massively.
Massively. I know.
Particularly if you're writing it as you go along, like I do. Like, you could get into all sorts of trouble. So I've never changed course because of that, but in a comment, if a reader comments on something, it might be that they've latched onto something that I wasn't anticipating someone latching onto, and then I'd be like, oh, actually, that is quite interesting, and that might be pulled out in a bit more detail in a future chapter. Or if a character proves particularly popular or something, I might be like, oh, actually, that character did work. I'll bring them back at some point down the line. A bit like, if you got a guest star on a TV show again, and everyone's like, oh, that actor was amazing, and then they come back for more guest stars the next season. I think the comparisons with Triverse is always to the TV show format rather than to a novel, which has been it's been really fun to try and figure out, like, how does that work in a text-based serial format.
That really explains the writing to the page, rather than having it edited and ready to go like I do it, because that's exactly, season to season the show might be written, but it might not. And people, scripts are being edited and improved and changed right up to the minute that the filming, they go into production for seasons, for TV as well as. So that explains it to me much better, actually. All the time when you were talking about it, as we began talking, I kept on thinking it's TV, it's TV, it's TV. So it's like, oh, okay. So that entire format makes much more sense to me now. So you'll get steered. You will get steered if a reader says, "Oh, I really love the relationship between so and so," or I wonder what, that kind of thing. That'll enter your. But will you comment back, or will you just put it in your pocket?
No, I won't normally be like, oh, that's a good idea. But I do reply. I reply to comments, and sort of engage with it without. So I don't want to. Obviously, you don't disagree with the reader and their particular reading on something. But if they're going down a completely wrong tangent, that can be interesting. But again, I don't try and correct them, because they'll discover that in the text at some point. But it's always an interesting interplay, that, because they don't actually want me to go in and just tell them that this is how it is, because that stops it being interesting. But there's one example where there's a very minor character in the very first chapter of Triverse, back in September 2021, who's just this one-off character who was in the prologue, and that was meant to be it. Basically, she was kind of there as a plot device, basically, to get through the stuff the prologue had to do. But there's one particular reader who, then for the next 2 years, kept going, "What happened to Sally?" Over and over again, as a joke, but also kind of that would be good. So I did actually, at the start of this year, give her a 5-part little kind of tangent storyline that went back, and that's something I probably wouldn't have done if that reader hadn't semi-jokingly badgered me about it for years. And it turned into a really nice little story. So that's the story I eventually told about her is not at all what that reader would have expected or thought of, but it probably wouldn't have been told at all if they hadn't put it in my head as a possibility. So that was
and your way of serialization allows for that level of agility and freedom of movement, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which has got huge pluses to it. I still don't. Actually, maybe that does answer the question of why broadly genre fiction writers, serializers are more. There are more writing to the page, the serialization page, than there are literary fiction. Maybe that's it, because we're writing. Mine is very much a novel edited for serialization. There's no two ways about that. And if somebody thought it was great, if somebody looked at Fallout and went, brilliant, I want to adapt that, they would literally have to buy the rights and write. The adaptation to screen would be fundamentally quite a different piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So, so I think that explains the differences because, as we often say, like for me, the idea of writing a novel live is just insane. It's just like not in a million years, but actually interesting. I mean, this has been really helpful because I'm teaching again the serialization workshop with London Writers Salon in September. And I think trying to explain what will suit which person, depending on what
Mm-hmm.
writer you are, this is a much clearer explanation of what will suit who.
Yeah.
So I'll
And,
use that. And I've been pointing people to your index, your serialization index as well, as I said, because
yes,
it's so comprehensive.
It's the way of writing that is, it's really common in comics. Like this is how most comics are written, issue to issue. I mean, they will be like potentially 6 months ahead of time, and obviously they need to do it. The writer needs to write it far enough ahead that the artist can do the art. But essentially, they're writing it as they go along. TV's the same.
That makes sense to me now. I just hadn't clocked it, but now I've got it.
Yeah, it's far less common when it comes to the prose literature, that kind of thing, because we're just so used to the novel.
The novel, although I think when Dickens was serializing, I think it was Dickens. I think he was pretty much producing chapters. That's why a lot of his novels were so long, because it was all it was audience pleasing, and his publisher was saying more, no, do more. I think I have to check that. Maybe somebody who's listening can correct me. Anyway, certainly there is precedent for literary fiction to be produced as a serialization, written as it were week to week, but it's not. I really don't think it's applicable now, because it's not publishers it's not my publisher who is getting me to serialize my work. It's the author doing it. And I do it to try the work out and then take it down and then submit it to publishing. So it's a sort of slightly different set of circumstances.
Yeah. So with you and something like Fallout, did you see that almost as a sort of test bed then? Was it like a beta reader? Let's see what the reaction is to this thing, and then that will help determine what I do next with it.
Well, it was more, In Judgment of Others was definitely that, because it had been turned down by everybody, and my bones told me it was a good novel, but the industry was telling me they didn't want it, which, as everybody knows, is a very hard thing to not take personally. All that actually meant was that the editors we'd send it to didn't like it, but that's only 100 people out of bazillion million people. But anyway, that's the terrible process in the brain. So that one was to reassure. I just wanted to be like, okay, let's see. I need to find out if this is a good novel or not. And it turned, so that was very much trying to work out. And yes, the feedback came back. Yes, this does work. I could see it worked as a novel. And then with Fallout, because we hadn't finished submitting it, actually, we'd done one round, and then we pulled it because we didn't get any bites. And then I said, okay, I'm going to serialize it, because of the editing process that went with serialization meant that In Judgment of Others was a much, much better novel after I'd serialized it. The structural formation of it, the tightness of the chapters, the evenness of the chapters, and also I lent on the classic 3-act structure, a very known, tried and tested film structure. And it created a much better novel. There's no question about it. I think if I had submitted In Judgment of Others in the state that it was after it was serialized, I think we would have got a bite. So I wanted to put Fallout through that same process, because it's such, for me, as it's a brilliant editing process, because you get to really, because I do it before I send out the first chapter. The whole thing is edited, the audio is recorded, all the artwork's done. It's all scheduled. It's ready to go. I get this 30,000-foot view of the entire novel, and I get to lay it. If it's a 3-act structure or a 5-act, whatever, I get to lay it on that structure and see. Is it falling? Is it evenly spaced? Is it 50,000 words to the denouement, and then we just end really quickly? Do you know what I mean? Now, that's a problem. So we need to move that. So it really gave me an editing skill that I was unaware of before. And in fact, my agent said to me, next time you write a novel, can you write it as though you are going to serialize it? because that will absolutely give you what it does. I think is it gives a literary fiction work that little edge of commercialism, which allows it to be easily digestible by an editor who's a little bit afraid of, you know, sort of literary fiction in the sense that it might not follow a structure which is, you know, a usual structure, I suppose, or even if it just means that your content, so I can still be going into depth and getting under the hood of the psyche and being free of cliche and all the things that I really endeavor to do to really get inside the characters in very small, you know, domestic spaces, really. But it just gives it a slightly more easy to eat structure. I think that's really what she meant. So for me now, like, it's on, you know, we've taken it down and it's doing its thing as it needs to. I can't talk about it, but it's definitely made it a more easily digestible novel. So yeah, for this one, it's really changed my thinking around the novel I'm writing now in terms of, you know, finding that sweet spot between writing exactly what I need to write. So I'm not writing to order. I'm writing the book that's in front of me, no question. But I fully acknowledge that the industry has certain needs and readers have certain needs. Well, the industry is led by that very broad brush of what readers need, which Richard Osman puts brilliantly. They just needs to be super simple. They need to know what it's about, you know, all that kind of stuff. Make it easy. And Tyler does it brilliantly. Make it easy, even if the content is hard. So yeah, it's taught me a huge amount, and that's what I'm doing. What's it taught you? Your version.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's tricky because, like, in terms of, I mean, I've always written stuff since I was tiny, but like since I've written properly, as in actually produced finished projects, like I've always serialized. So I
Okay.
started it 10 years ago as an experiment, having never finished a manuscript basically, and hitting a point where I was like my late 30s, I think, and my son had been born, which meant, you know, having a very young child, you realize that you have hardly any time and that you're not actually going to ever have much time. So you can't just keep putting it off. And then you also get that, well, I don't know if this is a common thing, probably is, like an immense sense of your own mortality. Like having a child is a good way to realize that you're not going to be around forever, I think.
Yeah.
At which point I was like, oh, well, I kind of wanted to be a writer when I was younger, and I seem to have forgotten to do that. And that's when I then stumbled into serializing by accident, just on Wattpad as an experiment. I thought I was going to do like a 6-chapter little thing, which then turned into a sort of smallish novel-sized thing. And I was writing every week and kept writing until the project was finished. And I was like, oh, that's the first time that's happened. And I've been doing it ever since, basically.
Yeah.
So for me, it was very much matching the practical process to the creative element, and discovering that my inability to finish a project was less to do with skill as a writer, I suppose, and more to do with the practical way in which I was putting it out to the world. And as soon as it was going out every week, and, you know, even if there was only one person reading, which in the early days it was basically, you know, one person was showing up, that just meant that I came back consistently. And that's kind of been my whole thing since then, which is that, you know, it's about that consistency rather than about writing every day and doing like 2,000 words every day and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's more like, it doesn't matter how fast or slow you do this thing, as long as you're doing it in a consistent manner. And publishing in a serial way is like the most efficient way to create a consistent writing habit, because you just have a built-in deadline every single week.
And you get a little carrot every week, even if it's only just one like, whatever it is. So I think that is one of the beauties of doing it your way. Which and I in fact I met someone at a literary festival just on Saturday who said, yeah, I've got this piece of work and maybe serialization's the thing I do. And I think for a lot of people, it just gets them up and off the, you know what I mean? Like, it's up and it's getting down, it's off the page. And then you get your little boost because somebody's, or even if no one's reading, you get that kind of success of like, or that flutter, like, oh my God, it's gone out into the world. So yeah, I think it gets people over that hump, which, I mean, there are millions of people out there with a novel half written in a drawer because it's hard and they can't get over that bit in silence on their own.
Like the whole point of my newsletter, like the non-fiction side of my newsletter, where I do like writing advice and that kind of stuff, but like I don't teach like how to write higher quality stuff because there's other people who are far better qualified than me to do that. For me, it's all about just getting some writing done because you can't become a better writer if you're not writing in the first place. And serialization was the way that I managed to write a lot more. I think I've become a better writer simply because I've consistently done writing. So yeah, that was a big deal for me. And having discovered that, it's kind of like, I just want to tell everyone and go like, look, if you're really struggling and if you never finish anything and if you're always distracted by other projects, just try doing it this way. It sounds a bit mad, but actually it works rather nicely for some people.
No, I mean, I think that's just a super wise thing to say, piece of advice to anybody. You cannot become a better writer unless you're writing. And in order to do that and have that support by serializing it, just getting it out there every week, you are doing that. And actually what you meet, no matter where you are in your learning curve, you meet support, don't you? I think. Yeah. Right here on Substack, anyway, I think you meet support, and then you do become a better writer every single week of putting that work out there. You learn and you become a better writer.
Yeah,
it's a brilliant piece of advice.
And then you, particularly with kind of serial writing like this, you do build the habit. Like if you've always struggled to create a writing habit, this is a great way to do it. So back when I started it was really difficult getting a chapter out every week, like almost impossible. But over time, I got more used to it, and now I can do it fairly easily, touch wood. And now I write a chapter of fiction every week, and I do the Monday newsletter, which also goes out with like audio recording podcast versions. I occasionally do videos. So I've sort of doubled my writing output, I suppose.
Wow.
And I'm doing other random bits here and there. And all of that would have been entirely impossible, like literally impossible to me 11 years ago. I couldn't have fathomed how to do it. But then slowly, bit by bit, you kind of build it up. And it's not easy. It's a ridiculous amount of work. But it's something that it was literally impossible to my brain, I now do on a weekly basis. And that's quite exciting. And switching over to Substack in 2021, or rather, switching to my own newsletter format has just kind of accelerated all of that. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's a fitness. I noticed that I often take July off. That's my break in the year. And when I come back to work again in August, I have to build that. I can feel the fitness that I build throughout the rest of the year has slightly waned. And also it's a confidence, isn't it? When you write every day, you do get more confident. And that means that you cut out a lot of the time spent doubting, deleting, worrying, nail biting. The whole thing just gets quicker. And I think I find I use my time much more efficiently now because it's a confidence, not in my work, but in the process of writing. I now understand that this process is just about getting it on the page. And then once it's out, then you can start editing about. So that's why it took me 12 years to write my first novel and only 18 months to write the second one. Confidence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And building in that consistency. And I think the thing that worries me is that quite often, like the standard advice for how to build a writing habit or that consistency is you must write every day, or you must do X amount every day. And for some people that works great, which is cool. But for loads of people, for all sorts of different reasons, that's not possible. So my approach is very much like the opposite way around. It's like, what's the least amount you can write, but still make progress? Because whatever that is, at some point you will then have a novel. But like, if you can only write once a week, that's fine. But make sure it's every week. And realizing that, I think, is what helped me write. Because otherwise, if you're trying to do the right everyday thing and then you can't do it, you're just continually disappointing yourself and then feeling like you're a failure.
Yeah, I teach that, and I say it to friends or emerging writers. Like I set the bar incredibly low. How to set it super low, and then be consistent. And it is that it's sustaining whatever the practice is. low, easy, consistent, sustain it. Yeah. And it builds confidence. And you do. I mean, I do, as I say, I write every day, but even that often it doesn't feel like enough. But I know if I do that every day, eventually, suddenly I'll end up with a novel. I'd be like, how the hell did that happen? And it happened because I turned up totally by accident. I turned up and I did that thing. It's wild, man. We're nearly out of time, Simon. Look, it's 3:00.
No.
What was I going to say? Yes, anybody listening who has got a piece of work and they just don't know how to get it up and off the page, Simon is a great resource for building that confidence and doing what he does, which is to serialize. Live serialization is a brilliant thing. So subscribe to Simon and he'll teach you how to do it.
Yeah. It's not for everyone, but for some people it might be the one weird way of doing something that will actually
actually I think it's probably for many people it just and then they might not then do it as their practice once they're up and out, but it might just move that piece of work forward. And if you want to know about the daily whining of writing a novel, you can subscribe to me.
You need to work on the pitch a little bit there.
Oh, really? Delightful. See, an hour flew by. I knew it would.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Could probably talk for another hour, but yeah.
We could easily talk for another. We didn't get on to number 81 in fiction. I'm rising and then I'm again. And
okay, maybe we need a
whatever that is.
A separate rant / conversation about that.
We do, yeah. All right, great to see you. And see you in the stacks. Okay.
Yes, excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.